Good afternoon, it's Coach Jim. This is Volume 7 of Coach Points from our game last Wednesday against Glen Ellen. This was really just a fun game to be a part of and to witness. I thought the boys played great. And frankly, I think we were just a better team. And that says a lot about the team and the growth that we've had relative to last year. One of the things I told the boys before the game started, given the rain and given the weather and especially the late start, it was really going to be which team stayed focused and engaged and supportive of each other, from the beginning to the end was really probably the more likely to win the game. And I think that we definitely showed up and were ready to battle from the get-go. So I'm really proud of the boys and the amount of effort and determination they had in the game. I know we battled some really tough conditions, especially there at the end. But really for the first 5 innings, I think it was probably the best baseball I've seen out of our team in these 2 years in terms of all-around play, offense, pitching, defense, base running was just fantastic across the board. A few themes I want to point out on. One is I think we were hitting the ball really hard. We had at least 6 deep fly balls and hard hit line drives into the outfield, probably harder than any ball that Glen Ellen hit on the night. So that was really just fantastic to see. And then things we can learn from and want to point out. One is like line drive defense. We had a few examples. We just want to focus a little bit more closely on that. Another thing I want to focus on is just pitching and the importance of getting ahead in the count. And then also offensively, just kind of navigating the strike zone, which can vary from game to game. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But all in all, just a really great effort. As we get into some of the key stats that we look at, the backstop rate, which we knew was going to be a huge defining factor in this game with the long grass behind home plate, the long distance between home plate and the fence. And you see Glen Ellen, they had 14 balls hit the backstop out of 104, 13.5%. Ours was a bit lower than that, 10.4%, 11 out of 106. 7 of those 11 were in the 6th inning when Glen Ellen made that big comeback and got within 1 run. So it's not hard to see how important being able to stop the ball, keeping those base runners from advancing and especially scoring is in determining the outcome of the game. So this is something, the reason we track it is we just, as a team, we want to be, take pride in that number and really try to keep it as low as possible. Beat the other team first and foremost, and then improve as a team as the season goes on. Our called strike and whiff rate was ahead of theirs as well, 30.9, which is in the good range here, versus 27.2, which is slightly below average. We had really solid effort across the board. Luke especially, 38.8, which I think is the highest rate we've seen, this season so far. So, and we'll focus on that a little bit more. Out rate, they had 12 out of 25, 48%, probably lower than they would hope. They did miss, they didn't come up with quite a few plays that one would probably consider routine, and that made a big difference in the game. Ours, although it says 0-0, was 9 out of 16, which was 58%, which was the same as last year. And we had 1 base running out, not a huge deal. But 8-7 score, came down to the wire, but all in all, a really good effort. A couple other things I want to look at, and this is, I won't get into all this detail. I know it's a lot of numbers on the page here. But one thing I mentioned before is we really did a great job of getting ahead in the count, and I'll focus on that in a bit in terms of what that does for us. What this graph does, it really it tracks sort of our offensive mindset in terms of taking pitches, seeing pitches, how many of those are strikes, and it really kind of helps me understand the story of the game and break it down a little bit further, and we can see kind of what changes from period to period. So this is all our games when we're batting, and here's all of us, basically our opponents or when we're pitching, and then they're summed up, and then the last most recent game, the Glen Ellen game's here in the middle. So it's really these middle 4 rows that we'd focus on. But the one thing I wanted to point out is these last 2 columns, this first one especially, is the percentage of the time we have an 0-1 count versus a 1-0 count. So basically if you're starting in a hole versus starting ahead in the count, which we know, or if you watch MLB, is a huge factor, and your batting average goes up by hundreds of points or down by hundreds of points depending on the count. And then similarly, going 1 and 2 versus 2 and 1, that critical third pitch in the at bat. So you see this. What really sticks out this for Glen Ellen, we got ahead of the count 65.6% of the time, which is some of the highest numbers that we've seen so far, and much higher than what we've been tracking in previous games. And then our team on Wednesday, 44.1%. So that's a big difference in terms of getting ahead of the count versus getting behind. And then the 1 and 2 versus 2 and 1, 28.6 versus 61.9. Obviously, a huge difference. So that really just gives us the ability, to mix up pitches and pick our spots. And I think we really kind of picked them apart in the game and kept their offense at bay. You see some other things here that they, we swung and missed a little bit more than they did. But all in all, I think it was a really good effort, and obviously a lot of numbers on the page. But like I said, it helps kind of tell the story of the game. So we go back to the video and some clips I want to show. One thing, we had 9 strikeouts in the game. Here's one, a drop third. But then Alex does a great job in terms of getting that tag. This is one thing I think we can learn from the other team. If you're ever swinging and you have 2 strikes, swing and miss, you see his momentum takes him back to his dugout. You never know if that ball is going to be dropped or not, so you should just, there's no harm towards at least taking 1 or 2 steps towards first base in this situation. So just so we know, I think typically we're going to be on the first base side of the dugout, so this may not happen for us. But in any case, if you swing and miss, don't assume that it's caught. You always could kind of glance back, especially if it's a low pitch. You can even take 2 or 3 steps towards first. The big difference is, as opposed to this tag, which is a sure out, if you can get far enough away for the catcher or you force a throw, you never know what could happen. So it's a good play by Alex there, but something we can learn from Glen Ellen. Here's another base running thing that we've talked about in the past. The grounder to third when we got a runner on second. You'll see the third baseman boots it here. It probably shouldn't even make this throw, but we see Cale essentially goes back to second base at this point in time. So, he did the right thing in terms of not trying to advance or run into an out. But you only need to go back as far as you absolutely need to get back. If there were a throw to second, to be able to get back safely, you don't necessarily need to go back any further than that. So that kind of kills any chance of getting a third on this play, which didn't turn out to be a big deal because there was an overthrow and he advanced after that. The other thing is, if as a third baseman, if you're ever in this situation, if he doesn't field this ball cleanly like this, any runner is going to be safe in this situation. So one thing you can do as a third baseman, if you're ever in this situation, he could fake this throw here and not throw, and see if this runner from second would take a couple steps towards third and potentially get him out. So something to know for the future if you're ever in that situation. So like I said, we had a number of huge hits. I mean, this was just a huge hit in the second inning by Alex, driving in 2 runs. And this is just one of many examples we had that of just really hard hit balls. I mean, here's Aiden. I mean, this is an out, but this is just a really hard hit ball, just right at the center fielder, and I think worth noting, even though it was caught. This is exactly what we're looking for in terms of our offensive style and strategy. This is going to pay off in the long run. Cale just absolutely tattooed this ball later in the game. past the center fielder. Probably the hardest hit ball he's hit this year for sure. It got us to second and third. And then unfortunately for Kale, Aiden was hitting immediately after him. I think the catcher or the center fielder was playing much further back after Kale had hit that one past him, and then Aiden basically hit it right to him. But just another smash ball. It was good to see Jonathan Benkin get into the mix here. Another smash into right field. Right fielder at the back pedal, but that's another really good hit, and exactly what we want to see with 2 outs, just going down, swinging, going down, fighting. And then JR, although I lost the GoPro camera view to see his extra base hit, you can see the intent that he swings with and puts it in play, and got a double on this play. So a lot of really good examples here. So as I mentioned earlier, a little bit about line drive defense. Here's a play, I think, in the first inning. Pretty hard hit ball right at Luke there at shortstop. You can see, I think these balls that come off the bat like that are a little bit deceiving, especially because these bats are so loud. So you see Luke kind of staggers a little bit there in his initial reaction and ends up not getting to the ball in time. The key thing here, on these hard hit balls, as tough as it may sound, like, if you can just stop the ball, you've got time to get it out. So one is like making sure you get your glove in the dirt. We want to be moving forward on the line drive as much as possible, as opposed to letting it bounce. So if possible, to be moving in and through the ball and getting it in the air is a much easier catch than trying to negotiate that bounce. It may have a ton of spin on it. It may react strangely as it hits the ground. It's just a much tougher play. But then, if you need to get your body in front of it to stop it, it's almost like a pitch that's low in the dirt. If you can just knock it down, you're likely to get that out. There was an example later in the game with JR. That was the one Alex did it really well, where you see him working through the ball. And here's one earlier in the game with one hit at JR, where he, instead of kind of getting in front of it, he plays it to the side. So again, those are really hard plays to get, but they could really change the game if we make those plays. So something to keep in mind. I highlighted Alex's play there at short. Alex did a really great job catching as well, and I think he's been probably our most solid all-around defensive player this year. Just hustling and diving for that play, which was a really tough play. Not the most graceful dive, but still a really good effort. We'll see more from Alex in a minute. So there's an example. I don't think we've seen this so much. This was a delayed steal from second to third. And, I don't really have too much of a problem with this. Like, first of all, Alex is trying to frame that pitch into a strike, and he gets the call. So that was a really good job by him. But that, pause and that delay, so the runner to go. I think Luke right here is communicating that he's running, so he's doing the right thing. Aiden does get over to get the third in time. So this may have been a tough play to make, but with those runners on base, maybe I believe probably the play is to pop up a little bit earlier. You'll see that also Alex, in order to make this throw, he has to kind of walk around the batter to get in a position to make this throw. I think if he were to pop up as if he were making a hard throw back to the pitcher, he'd be, in front of the plate or at the plate, and maybe in a better position to make a throw quicker. But we see we get a little bit caught off guard there. So just something to keep in mind when there's runners on second. And we had a couple examples so far in the season where we've had runners steal home, and that's just sort of awareness of the base runners and being, just making firm throws back to the pitcher. So something to keep in mind there. So I mentioned Luke's performance, and I mentioned our team's ability to get ahead of the count, and that was really a huge factor in the game. I mean, Luke, frankly, I think it was just a masterful pitching performance. Just mixing up his pitches and really just throwing a ton of strikes. He had first pitch strike, I think, to 10 out of the 12 batters he faced, and I think he had 37 out of 49 pitches with strikes. Just really, really nice. And the thing is, when you get ahead of the count and you got a good changeup, it really keeps the other team off guard. So this is one of their better hitters. I think it was a 2-strike changeup. Really got a weak contact. The guy's got to fight that off, and we got out of that inning. So that was huge way to end the inning. Luke came in with the bases loaded and got a strikeout and a pop up. Here's another example of I think a changeup that the guy chases. So just a lot of really good examples of pitching by Luke. An example earlier in the game, we've talked about this in the past. When you're on third base and there's a fly ball, into the outfield, we want to tag immediately. So we see that JR he's doing the halfway to home thing. The reason we do this is if you tag up and that ball drops in, you're going to score. And if it's caught, you have a good chance of tagging and scoring. If you are halfway, you're only going to score if the ball drops. Now that ball was foul, but in any case, when you're on third base and there's less than 2 outs, you see that ball in the air, just go back to the base, and then just go from there. The key thing is, this isn't the deepest fly ball in the world, but the first baseman having to go back out and get this, his momentum is going to be carrying him away from the plate. It'd be very difficult for him to turn around and make a strong throw home. So we more than likely would be sending the runner on a play like that. So something to keep in mind and something we'll keep working on. So as I mentioned about the strike zone, we had a number of examples where we struck out looking, and I definitely am stressing that we go down swinging. I think in all of these examples we had runners in scoring position with less than 2 outs. Really any ball into the outfield or any ball even on the ground is going to score this runner at third. The thing to note here is, this may or may not have been a strike. It looks like it's off the plate a little bit, but this ump was calling that consistently a strike throughout the game. And I think the thing to note is obviously you have to make an adjustment as a hitter, but I think also communicating with your teammates, as you go into the dugout, like what are you seeing? What's he calling? What's he not calling? That's all information that you can, a teammate can take up to the plate with them, or you can take to heart for your next time up at the plate. So that's just something I think, we're going to have umps that have varied strike zones. Some are going to be wider than others. Some are going to be very wide. With 2 strikes, this is not a pitch that I would like to see anyone take with 2 strikes. I think if it's not a pitch you can drive, you got to try to fight that off and try to foul one off and live to see the next pitch, especially when we have runners in scoring position. So a couple other examples, and you'll see I think these are basically in the exact same spot. And here we had runners on second and third, and then later JR again same spot, runner on third. So these are all opportunities for us to score runs, and really any ball in play, we'd be sending the runner home on that. I mentioned the backstop rate and how important that was. A couple of key things for our catchers to point out. This was the inning where they really kind of got back into the game. And Kale, walked quite a few guys in the 6th. We see JR here. This ball is in the dirt, and Kale throws very hard, so it's really easy to say to put your body in front of it. But you'll see JR kind of stands up on that, and the ball gets in front or in between his legs. We got to use the gear that we have and use that chest protector and stay down on it. I thought earlier in the game, Alex had just a really good example of what we want to see blocking a ball. But that ball was wide of the plate and also in the dirt, and you'll see he gets down and moves over to block that ball. Just a really good example, and they kept the runner at second. So that was really good. We had some really good defensive plays. This was a big play in the game. This little pop up. You know, we had a couple hits. They had a couple hits on these little kind of bloopy balls that were in between the pitcher, in between the mound and the infielders. But here's one that Luke really got a good jump on and ran up on and made the grab. So that's one of their better players that we got out there. So that was really good to see. Just good jump and good commitment on that. Here's a ball where Kale, really got off the mound quickly. They had a runner on third here, and we got that out. So just important to get these outs, especially when we're in the lead. We'll trade an out for a run. On this play, just something to keep in mind if we watch it again. Given where this ball is, this is a very difficult play Kale made a fantastic play to get over to this ball and make a good throw, beat him by a step. This is more likely an easier play for the third baseman to make. I believe that's Aiden. So because his momentum is carrying him forward, and he's facing first base. So something to keep in mind as a third baseman, just to be very aggressive on those balls. And we knew any of these balls that get in the grass were going to die. So any grounder that's in the grass, we got to be very aggressive, charging forward. And then in the last inning, this is the sixth inning again. We brought in Marco. The lead dwindled down to basically one, and we needed 2 outs. And the reason we brought Marco in, he throws a lot of strikes, and our defense backed him up. And this was a really nice play by Luke. Almost got it in the air to double him up, but I see he gets that ball in the hop and just pops up immediately to make that strong throw over to first. And then, what I said to the boys after the game, this may have been the defensive play of the game. It was a 1-run game, foul pop. JR was just textbook defense in terms of getting that mask off, finding it, and then you see how secure he is with this catch with 2 hands, making sure he makes that out. That's exactly what we want to see. And we've seen in the past those foul pop-ups are not an easy play for catchers, and that turned out to be a key difference maker in the game. So we scored a bunch of runs in the top of the 7th that ultimately didn't count to the final score, but that was great to see us put some insurance runs up. And I know that we would have beat them in the 7th had we played anyways. You see Marco here just warming up in the driving rain, and our guys were ready to go. So, like I said, I really just was proud of the boys for the fight that they had from beginning to end, the level of engagement they had, and how they were supporting each other. I noted before Glenn Ellen had made a couple errors in the field on pretty routine plays, and I noticed the boys were kind of chirping at each other after those plays, and I didn't see much or any of that from our team. So I was really proud of the guys in terms of that they fought and battled and supported each other, and I'm just really excited to see how we just continue to grow and develop over the course of this season. So in any case, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Boys, make sure you're nice to your moms tomorrow, and I will see you guys either tomorrow or Tuesday. Take care.